Hello, my name is Zachariah with Old Man Gaming. You, dear listener, have decided to tune into another Snap Judgment review. What is a Snap Judgment review? If you've never listened before, I get about 5 to 10 hours with the game. I'm trying to give you an idea whether you're going to like it right away or not. I think game reviewers nowadays get a little too wrapped up in completing or near completing a game, so I'm just looking at it right away. That coupled with the fact that I think games are one of the most subjective forms of art. I won't be giving a score to this review. I will be instead giving you an overview of what the game is, giving you a list of the pros and the cons, in my point of view, as all reviews are, and then telling you whether I personally will be sticking with the game outside of the purposes of this content. So, I have to add a couple more disclaimers in here. First of all, you will have noticed in the title of this video it says My GM Only. It's because this is a WWE 2K26 review, but it is only for My GM mode. I only play My GM mode on these games. I don't even know how to do a wrestling match. I don't learn the buttons. I turn the HUD off immediately, and I like it because it gives me a sandbox to play My GM mode. I have the competitiveness to beat other players, but I also get to book crazy matches and watch those matches. So that's what I like to do with WWE 2K26. Which also brings me to another huge disclaimer, because I'm not going to lie to you, ladies and gentlemen, I've been kind of struggling with how to do this video. Before I get into that, I have to apologize for my voice. Anybody who listened to the last podcast will have noticed that I was already starting to get sick. I got a really nasty case of flu B. My voice has not come back, which is why there's not a podcast this week. But I feel like I've done a review for My GM mode every year since 22. I need to get a video out this week, so I'm kind of trying to push through. So bear with me. And now on to the big one. Look, I review mostly My GM mode. I also take a look at the Creation Club suite, and I also look at the Creation suite to kind of see what it is. Because I do like to create some just random wrestlers, usually based off myself and friends, to add to GM mode. And I also, one of my biggest things is downloading wrestlers from other companies, putting them into my GM mode so that we can get kind of crazy dream matches like Kyle Fletcher and Kenny Omega taking on your Randy Ortons and your Roman Reigns. That being said, the biggest problem with this is the ringside pass. Look, anybody, unless you've been living under a rock, you know that the ringside pass is a problem. But now I'm going to discuss why it's a problem for anybody who is just a My GM mode player, or maybe just a Universe mode player. So last year and previous years, they had something called a supercharger. So every time you boot up a new WWE 2K26 game, there's a couple of things that have locked content. One of them is a bunch of characters that are just locked behind virtual currency that you earn by playing the game. And then another one is stuff that's locked behind showcase mode. I don't play the showcase mode because it's playing the game and I don't really do that. So I always miss out on the parts in showcase mode. That's just something I've come to be okay with. Whereas the supercharger is something that you buy for an extra $5 and it unlocks all the things that you needed for virtual currency, which is nice for a GM mode person. I mean, it sucks that it's extra money. It's a little bit feels like a ripoff, but like why those characters can't just be in the game, but whatever. Well, this year they did away with the supercharger stuff, and instead they locked it all behind a battle pass called Ringside Pass. And there's a premium tier and a lower tier. You can buy out each tier, and that ends up being to about $77. What's even worse is this whole Ringside Pass is going to be up for like 3 months, I think. Then it switches over to a new Ringside Pass, meaning anything you didn't get in the first one, you lose. And there are so many wrestlers locked behind this, and so many wrestlers that are absolutely paramount to having those really cool dream matches. Stone Cold Steve Austin, Roddy Piper, Bret Hart, just to name a few, locked behind this Ringside Pass stuff. But that's not even all. They added a really cool feature to GM mode, which I want to talk about later, called custom belts. But then they locked half the belts behind the Ringside Pass too. And to make matters worse, the only way to earn Ringside Pass, like substantial Ringside Pass experience, is to play the matches. I don't play the matches. You don't get anything from spectating. I have been earning somehow. I'm not exactly sure how I am through the the GM mode. It's not impossible, but at the same time, so far I've played about 10 hours of this game and I've only earned 75 out of 1,000. And that's 1,000 just to go to the tier 2 and unlock something. So the ringside pass is a real problem. I just decided I'm going to talk about it now, get it out of the way so that I can talk about GM mode for the rest of the review and just try and stay centered on that, though I'm sure we'll come back up. The creation suite is brought down by this because all of those exclamation points have like tripled now. The exclamation points being characters or belts or arenas that you can't get because you haven't unlocked something on your own game. That's tripled because of all of this ringside pass stuff. In addition to that, not all of those characters are locked in GM mode too. So they don't show up when you look for them in the scouts and stuff. You can't put them on your draft list. You can't get them in the game, which is incredibly frustrating. Your huge roster that was promised to us of 400 plus wrestlers gets dwindled and cut down to nothing. And it's very frustrating. It hinders almost all of the parts of the GM mode that I'm supposed to talk about. Like I said, the belts, if there's a part on a belt that's locked, that somebody's using to make the next TNA belt, I can't get the TNA belt. So it becomes useless. I can't pull Kyle Fletcher because Kyle Fletcher uses one pair of socks from X dude over here that I'm never going to have unlocked. And it's incredibly frustrating for my GM mode players, or definitely my universe mode players, I would assume. People who don't necessarily play the game, who just use it as a sandbox to kind of make their own wrestling products. This is a nightmare for us. So that being said, that's a huge down. And again, if you are a player who's a universe or a GM mode, I don't know if I can recommend this game because of that. It's a lot of money to have a lot of stuff really, really locked. But let's get into the actual mode itself. What's my GM mode? My GM mode is a mode, we've talked about this every time it's come out. 22, they started the My GM mode back up. 22 I bought, and I have literally reviewed My GM mode every year since. And I've also done a show with a buddy of mine, Jeremy, OMGM. And it's a lot of fun. We're on hiatus right now for the first time ever because we finished a season and we're both at work, but we've already recorded the next season. Well, part of it. So you book against each other. You pick a GM, you pick a brand. Those give you special cards that you can play. And then you go through an entire fantasy drafting wrestlers that you can edit to your roster. You can also edit the amount of money you start with. You can edit, a lot of stuff. The card store and all sorts of different settings to set up your roster in the beginning. All of the features from last year are here with some added ones. They have also really redefined what it is to play My GM mode because My GM mode has always been, well, not the first one. The first one you could pick, but for the most part has been a 25-week season. So like half a year. You're looking at 5 pay-per-views and, 20 normal shows. They have slowly changed some things, but that has always been the same. This time we've 50 weeks, so a full year of shows. Not only do you have that full year of shows, but you still have the go-home show. You still have the conflict-laden pay-per-view shows where it's joint, where you're fighting against people. But they've added some really cool features to that. Those features that they have added are like the elimination chambers in there. Money in the Bank ladder matches are in there. And they actually are tied to those pay-per-views that you'll get, which is really cool. It enters some more layers. In addition to that, the big update this year has been the expansion of the matches and the custom belts. I'll talk about the custom belts first. So, when you go in to pick your brand or whatever, when you first start after the draft, you are prompted to pick your champions. But you can now also, there's a button that you can hit and you can change what title is used for all of your division championships. Now, want to put a little caveat on that? This does not change the divisions you have. So ECW, once again, does not have women's divisions. We're going to talk about it in cons. But you can change what every belt looks like. You can have it be you can have it be completely different from one of theirs. You can download Creation Club stuff or even a belt you've created yourself. One of the interesting parts of this too is that the belt will be announced as that belt. It's not going to be like if you change the Mutiny World Heavyweight Championship over to the TNA World Heavyweight Championship, they will announce the TNA World Heavyweight Championship the way they announce the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. Just disclaimer, TNA World titles are not in the game naturally. I downloaded them from the Creation Suite. Just want to give you guys a heads up. Don't want to get your hopes up. On top of that, you get to pick your champions. Your champions being, or just go on without them. And then, but yeah, it doesn't change the divisions itself, but it does change the identity of the titles, which is really cool. We'll talk about that a little bit in pros. Okay, so now let's go into the other side, the new stuff, which is the expansion on the match types. They have really expanded on the matches that can be used here. They've also expanded on the amount of people you can have in the ring, which is a huge thing people have been asking. Before, you could only ever have 4 people in a match, period, whether it's tag or normal. Now you can have up to 8 people in a match. This extends to tag teams, so you can have 4-way tag team matches, 3-way tag team matches. Some of the interesting stuff, you can have 6 ways, 5 ways for normal matches, and they have added just a host of interesting things in here. They've added dumpster matches and I Quit matches, Inferno matches, Bloodline rules. I actually played a Bloodline rules. It's one of my most favorite things in the GM mode because it literally picks characters randomly from anywhere, not just your brand. So I had a woman's title Bloodline rule match between a created character named Persephone, if you know, you know, and then Chelsea Green. And then Chelsea Green was, of course, the heel. For Chelsea Green, out comes Lash Legend. Not on my show. None of the characters were on my show. Lash Legend. We got a couple of other ones. One of my favorites were on the other side with Persephone. We got Stacy Keibler, which was a GM for another show, and Sting. Sting came out to beat on a bunch of women, which was hysterical to me. I love that part of it. It really makes it fun and interesting, so I really like that. The Inferno match was a lot of fun to watch. Another thing that they have really, really doubled down with is the presentation of the matches. It feels much more, especially when you're watching it, you've got the HUD off, it feels like you're actually watching a match. I would recommend, just decide, if you are a watcher, turn the downtime up in the sliders. Otherwise, you're going to be looking at very long ladder matches. Very long ladder matches, very long, multi-man matches because nobody stays down long enough. I turned it from 50 to 70 just so that everybody stayed down a little bit longer and we got through some of the matches before I got gray hair. All right, so, but that's the big expounce on GM mode is the 50-week seasons. They also added all these specialty matches into the pay-per-view stuff. So, you can't book an Elimination Chamber match, but Elimination Chamber will show up in the pay-per-views. And you put wrestlers in the Elimination Chamber. Your opponents put wrestlers in the Elimination Chamber, which is really cool. Same with War Games. Same with the Money in the Bank. Really cool stuff. They also added a bunch of weapons to this, attacks and whatnot. Which is very cool. The Creation Suite has been upgraded quite a bit, of course. Again, held down by all the things locked, because if a character has a part that is still locked, you better believe it's locked in your Creation Suite. And then, of course, the Creation Club Suite, the Creation Club we've already kind of talked about. So let's touch on pros and cons. Again, the big con is the ringside pass. I'm going to try to avoid bringing it back up in the cons here. I'm just going to talk about the cons of the GM mode. So, But first, we'll start with pros. I like to go positive. The presentation is amazing here. It is really fun to watch the matches. One thing I've noticed almost every year is that the AI of the wrestlers seems always batty when the game first launches. They do weird stuff. This time I haven't noticed anything. I think the last iteration of this, either 25 or 24, wrestlers just wouldn't climb in a cage match until like the second or third patch. Another one was no one would ever try and knock somebody off a ladder, so that would just end immediately somebody climbed. I haven't noticed any of that. It's pretty balanced. I mean, there's, of course, your little herky jerks and your little buggies here, but overall, everybody seems to know what they're doing. The addition of the other weapons are really cool. The attacks are amazing. I think they might be a little bit overused. I had a match where they got pulled and dumped probably like 7 or 8 times, and everybody was just covered in attacks, but that's kind of cool in its own way. So I think that the presentation stuff is definitely a huge pro for me, being on the watcher side of a game like this. My next pro, obviously, the versatility of having 8-person matches and the 50-week season. We're going to talk, this has brought a couple of downsides, which we'll talk about in the cons. But this is one of those things where, like, I think personally, overall, it's a good change. It just brought a couple of downsides that I wasn't really expecting, but are understandable and no real way to fix. But having a full 50-week season, having that is really cool. I think it's going to be really interesting to get through a season. I haven't yet, just because of other things. But I mean, and it's long. And I like to watch. I like to try and get as much in as I can. But yeah, the 50-week season is great. And the addition of the specialty matches, the extra specialty matches is great too. It makes it feel new and fresh. I love the new match types. That's another huge pro. And all of that is absolutely great. Everything they added is great. I think my biggest pro is the custom belts. I wasn't as excited about this because you couldn't change the division, but then I realized if I want to do a ECW with a woman's belts, and I can. I just don't pick the ECW brand. I pick NXT, but I change out all the titles for ECW stuff. And then don't have of an ECW brand that I'm going against. And then bam, I'm ECW. I mean, when you really think about it, other than the LCD screens, they announce all the titles as ECW titles. So you're good. I think that it's really cool. It almost kind of feels like you have custom shows here. You don't even really need custom shows because of those belts. It's weird how much of the identity of a show is tied to the titles, but it's really true here. Okay. We got to talk about the cons, ladies and gentlemen. So, of course, ringside pass, huge con. Already talked about it, already discussed it. It is a problem. That being said, let's try and stick to the GM mode. I think one of the big things that comes with the 50-week season that is a little bit frustrating is the fact that you really have to draft like 30 to 50 wrestlers. It doesn't seem like a lot when you're saying it out loud, but like your drafts have gone from like 20 minutes of drafting to like 40 minutes to an hour. Like me and Jeremy used to do keepers, a draft, first week of shows, watch a match each. It was probably about an hour and 15 minutes. It was probably a longer episode that we would do. That's not going to be possible anymore. We're going to have to do an episode just on the draft. Because you're drafting for 50-week seasons, you have $7 million to spend. So you need those people. And what's interesting is both times that I started a draft and I went into play, I thought I had enough people. And so I backed out of the draft. And I drafted way more than I would have drafted last year. And I was like, okay, I think I got enough. And I backed out. And I didn't have enough either time. I still had to go into the scouts and pick up like 5 or 6 people, especially if you're doing 8-way or 6-way matches. I mean, we're so predisposed for the roster count from last year that we forget that like an 8-person match is literally half your roster. So like from last year. Now you have to have the people to accommodate such big matches. But then you've got to think to yourself, if you want to do those matches, that's cool. What do you do with those extra people when they're not there? Because you don't necessarily have more people on your card. This is very interesting. It creates a whole new dynamic, and as crazy as it is, it really shifts what GM mode is about and how you play GM mode. I'm looking very forward to getting used to that new kind of like, ebb and flow. But we're in the cons. Like I said, your roster, you can't just do a draft. It is going, unless you auto draft. If you're doing a manual draft, you're going to be sitting there for a long time. And it can get a bit tedious and boring by the end. Okay. The other problem is, if you are somebody who does a show and you're timed and whatnot, it is going to take you longer to get through a season. Like me and Jeremy have a show where we do 26 episodes a season. That's how we've always done it. Now we've got to find some way to do 50 episodes a season, and that's tricky for us. So it'll be interesting, all things considered. I mean, we're still in the last game anyway for our actual show, so we're not ready to switch over yet. But when we do switch over, it's going to be an interesting situation. All right. So that brings me to closing, whether or not I'm going to stick with this. Look, I paid $70. I'm going to stick with it. That being said, this is probably going to be the last 2K game I purchase, at least for the foreseeable future. You might not get one of these on 2K27. I'm not going to spend $70 to go into this ringside pass thing again. I like the expanding of the roster and the weeks and all of that. I feel like that's in a place where I could play this without necessarily a ton of huge upgrades and keep it fresh and new for myself. And I think that with time, people will eventually upload characters without the parts that are hindering me, and I'll be able to get those dream characters. Maybe not as good a copy of them as I want, but I'll be able to get them and supplement my roster. It's going to take twice as long, and it's going to be twice as hard. So I'm not going to deal with the ringside pass again. Like, I just won't. Unless they walk this back for 2K27, I won't be purchasing another one. So I will be sticking with this game. You guys will be seeing it. Myself and Jeremy will probably be doing one more full season of 2K25 to finish that off. So it'll be a while before you see content on the channel, but we will then switch over to this, and it'll probably be the one we're in for the foreseeable future, I think. So did I get it right? Did I get it wrong? You guys can let me know in the comments below. You can influence this and all of our shows from our Discord, which is also in the description. You can join. And as long as you guys keep watching, let's see, I'll keep making them.